Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. McGurk. Your testimony is always candid and to the point. I know you're the messenger. I personally am concerned about the 14 months from now, the end of the 3 years, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I want it on the record I'm very concerned about that. I want to talk about Syria just a minute, though. It seems to me that we've had witnesses in here that have given us testimony that the best option in Syria is a Sunni fighting force on the ground, a coalition Sunni fighting force, not an American force, not an outside force, but a Sunni fighting force. We see in Iraq, we've got issues with Shia militia and security after a town is liberated and so forth. In private meetings with some of the major players, they've given us information that they're ready to stand up, in Saudi Arabia's case, potentially 30,000 fighting troops for a fight in ISIS, or to fight ISIS in Syria. Their concern is a lack of U.S. leadership and resolve, and so they're not doing that. They're waiting on the U.S. And so can you speak to that and in a little more detail? I'm concerned that we get into Syria, it's a much more confused battle space than what we see in Iraq. Iraq is about territory now, and as we saw in Afghanistan, and we're seeing today in Afghanistan, when the troops liberate a city and they turn it over to the police, that's where the Taliban comes right back. We see it this year as I sit here. So the question in Iraq is a different one. I'm trying to get at Syria relative to what kind of fighting force is going to be able to sustain a long-term effort, not only to take the ground, but to hold the ground once it's liberated in Syria.
So, Senator, the fundamental premise here of what we need are local people to liberate and hold their own territory. And so in the Sunni Arab areas of Iraq, we need Sunni Arabs from the local areas. So what we've tried to do, I mentioned mobilizing the tribes of Anbar province, training local police. We have a coalition effort led by the Italians, training about 900 local police every 3 months. We're looking now to triple that by the end of the year. These are kind of police leaders who then organize the local people. That effort has actually been successful, but we very much agree that we need Sunni Arabs to be the ones to liberate and hold their own territory, but oftentimes they need help. You need ISIL in many of these cities and towns that they've held for years is an army. I mean, they defend it like an army. And so you can't just take out a bunch of Sunni tribesmen and kind of train them for a couple weeks and put them in the fight to go liberate a city like Fallujah. It just can't work. I've also met with Sunni tribal leaders who are exiled from Iraq and Syria and claim to have tens of thousands of people ready to fight. We say, give us the names, we'll get them in the fight. And oftentimes they don't have that level of influence on the ground. So it's a very complex dynamic. What we found in Anbar, what's really critical is having presence. So we have 2 sites in Anbar province, one in Al-Assad Air Base and one between Fallujah and Ramadi at Taqadum Air Base. That's where our coalition advisors are located. And that has given us the ability to figure out who's who, organize local Sunni fighters and give them the capacity to succeed. And now in Syria, the reason we've gone from 50 Special Forces advisors up to 300 is for this very reason. And we recognize that the force that will ultimately
I'm sorry, are those 300 Special Forces primarily training? Is that what they're doing?
Primarily training, and some are out advising. But the main mission there, again, Manbij will be a difficult fight where that's ongoing now, but after Manbij, it is organizing the force that will push down on Raqqa.
Can I ask you a follow-up question on that? Last year in 2015, a training program was initiated. At the end of the day, we'd spent about $45 million in 2015 under testimony to Armed Services, and we had trained about 5 people. So that was an unmitigated disaster. As we sit here today, the numbers have been reported in the 100 range. And we've spent somewhere close to, I think we're approaching the $500 million that was authorized, I think. Can you talk about the training program that we've initiated? I know that we've got special forces there doing that, but how many forces are really going back in the fight? And are these really trigger pullers? Are they just enablers or spotters or support people?
Yeah, so let me try to explain what we're doing. So the effort that was tried to kind of organize and train these brigade-like units is something that didn't work. What we're doing now is there's a lot of fighters on the ground that are fighting ISIL every single day. Rather than taking them all out and training them in a 6-week course, what we're doing now is identifying those groups. They're vetted, they get support from us, they get supplies from us, and then we take out a couple of their leaders or some of the people they identify to learn how to call in airstrikes, to learn how to do more sophisticated type things. which then is a force multiplier for that unit. So we have a system now that is very, very well structured in terms of a force that we work with on the ground being able to call in precision airstrikes, but it takes some training. So rather than trying to organize these large units to maneuver around, which something that was not very successful, we're identifying units that are actually on the ground, they know the local area, they're able to fight, and then giving individual leaders those specialized skills that will enhance their capabilities on the ground.
I appreciate that, but we're really not adding additional fighters through that training mechanism at this point in any significant numbers. Is that fair to say?
Through that effort, no. What we are trying to do is organize and grow the force that will move down particularly on Raqqa, because that is a prime target of ours.
I noticed the ranking member's back. Do you have other questions? I think it's you and me right now until the people get back to voting.
I like the numbers here. This works well.
I've got another question. I'd like to talk about the second level of the fight. The first fight is kinetic, on the ground and in the air. And I see that's a very messy fight in Syria with all the different groups that are fighting each other on different days. I'd like to talk about the hybrid war that's underway. You've related to it earlier. In January of 16, the administration announced a major change in our direction there in terms of trying to counter the message of ISIS on social media and other hybrid platforms. How is that working, and have we been able to draft outside voices to really try to counter ISIS? I guess the question overall is, what are we doing today to really try to counter the ISIS message in this hybrid warfare and propaganda and cyber and social media?
So, great question. So we've, of course, established at the State Department the Global Engagement Center, the GEC, which is focused on this 24/7, but this isn't something that can just be done out of Washington. We need a global network to go after their online messaging. And, 2 years ago when this started, they had kind of free reign on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and their message was one of come join this glorious movement of the caliphate. And we've really reversed that trend. So Twitter is one data point. For every single pro-ISIL Twitter handle, there's now 6 anti-ISIL kind of combating them every 24/7 in cyberspace.
Where are those 6? Are they U.S. handles? Or are they?
No, they're all over the place. So some of them are just voices from the region.
Are they
different
coordinated?
parts of is kind of the non-coordinated or organic counter messaging. And so working with those companies, Twitter's taken off about 125,000 pro-ISIL sites. That's continuing, working with Facebook and YouTube on that. So, but you ask a good question, organized. And, the internet is kind of an organic, obviously, enterprise. You can't really just have centers to do this. But we do have coordinating.
We just stood up two Army brigades of cyber warfare warriors. So,
Yes,
I mean,
so we do. We have centers to kind of lead this effort, do some here. We have an organization in UAE called the Sawab Center. I went there to visit them. They're young, smart, engaged, dynamic, incredible young people, Muslim from the area that want to fight ISIL online. They're doing a great job. Malaysia's also been leading this, the UK. And that's important because in different parts of the world, the message is very focused from ISIL. In Europe, often it is these sun-drenched scenes of come bring your family, literally kids eating ice cream cones. It's a total lie. And so in Europe, they're working to counter that. But I think this now is starting to turn the tide against their message.
Let me rescue my colleague. There's no time left on the vote on the floor, so I want to make sure he gets over. Even though I'm not sure we're voting